Okay, so I think I can see a bunch of new faces, so welcome to them and welcome back to all the others. This is our first session with PowerPoint presentations. I know you were longing for them, so now they are coming. And it's entitled DHC in a Competitive Heat Market, but be sure we are not going only to do PowerPoint presentations. This is only a starter, an appetizer, for you to prepare nice questions. So you are advised to put your phones in silent mode, but you're also advised to use the Twitter line in order to put questions. We will have a questions and answers session at the end. I prefer not to cut the row of presentations, and we have all the questions together in the end. So we will use everything you've put on Twitter. So I'm sure Mr. Tim Rothway will put some questions, but hopefully there will be some others. So please prepare them. So I won't be long in introducing this topic because you've heard enough of me this morning. I would like to say, however, that in the same informal meeting of energy ministers, which said that promoting district heating is an efficient solution and cities should be involved as holders of it because there is a significant potential of use. Well, the next item actually was the consumer as an equal partner in the energy market, improving billing information and providing protection to vulnerable consumers, thus avoiding energy poverty. And of course, this is not only for the rest of the energy world, it is for us as well, and it is this that our speakers are going to address. In order to do that, we have the best possible speakers, as you can imagine. Johnsson with PROFU. Again, I try my best. Perfect. Thank you. He's been involved in system analysis of energy for some years. He's still very young, so I'm not going to say for ages, but he's the most experienced person you can imagine in this, with PROFU, and before that at Chambers University. In these last 2 years, he's been the project leader for a research project which is Heating Market Sweden, and of course the topic of his presentation will be Heating Market Sweden, no surprise. Then will come Jean Sacreste, and here my pronunciation of Lithuanian is going to be just perfect, so if you want to hear it again, Jean Sacreste, perfect. Jean Sacreste is the country director for Veolia in Lithuania, is the chairman of their two main companies here, Vilniaus and Litesko, which represents, he wanted me to say, 300 million euros turnover and 1,500 people. That's mainly district heating networks and CHP. He's got quite some experience as well. I'm not going to say the number of years with Veolia, with a special focus on the international energy operations. And Jean is going to speak about the Lithuanian experience on how to meet current expectations from customers through modernization of district heating schemes. Then we'll have Dr. Kravinkel. Dr. Kravinkel is the head of the newly founded department Customers Experience with the energy provider MVV in Germany. Before that, he's been on the board, I would say, of the Department for Housing, Energy and Environment at the Federation of German Consumers Organization. So is the best possible person to address customer, what our customer needs from a German experience. And then last, we will have Esa Hyvärinen, as I forgot to ask him how to pronounce his name, so I know it's going to be terrible, but he will correct it later. Esa is the Senior Vice President for Corporate Relations with Fortum, the well-known energy company. He's been in that position since 2006, and previously He worked with CEPI, so I guess this means lobbying for the paper industry in Brussels, and before that he was a senior advisor to the Finnish Ministry of Trade and Industry. So, without waiting anymore, John, if you want to start, and so should we just escape and then click upon your name.
Thank you. With such a perfect introduction, including my name, pronunciation of my name, I would go directly into the heating market of Sweden. Some years ago, we felt that heating market is a market in Sweden that hasn't had enough of attention. That's why we went out to our customers and said, isn't it the time for a heating market project in Sweden? 15 of them said yes directly. That means that this project has been financed of the actors on the heating market, and I will give you some glimpses of how it looks like in Sweden. Of course, as all local markets, every market is unique, but perhaps some inspiration could be found in Sweden. A short history. The heating market of Sweden in the 1970s was more or less total fossil. Most of it was oil, and we had a fantastic journey, which means that today we have more than 80% renewables and recovered heat, and district heating is the dominating technology, with a market share about 50% or even more. The situation today, if you look at the customers, is that the dominating customer group is the single family houses with a market share around 40%. And then you have the multi-family houses and different kind of premises, more or less the same share. And then we have some industry and, of course, our weekend cottages. And in total, more or less 100 terawatt hours a year. If you take another perspective of the heating market of Sweden, you can see that the total economical turnover is more or less 100 billion crowns, which is more or less 11 billion euro. And I said, perhaps you noticed, that the market share for district heating was 50% or more. But in economical terms, however, the market is dominated by electricity, which gives an indication that district heating could be a cost-effective solution. The heat market project is a very broad project and try to have analyze all the questions on the heating market. Today, however, I will focus on the district heating questions. How did we get here then? Yesterday, everything started locally. We had local environmental problems, which started a local engagement, which gave local restrictions. And from the local level, we have national legislations and a lot of policy instruments. After some year, we got the highest energy and CO2 taxes in the world, and we still have. From the beginning, a lot of solutions of the problem was we solve one problem each. For example, we introduced legislation for low sulfur oil. Today, however, we try at least to have combined measures, such as district heating and coupled production and waste incineration. Solutions that solve several problems in the same time. The increase of district heating and the energy system of Sweden is, of course, a history of regulations. But nowadays, I think you can describe the heating market of Sweden as a market competition under a political framework. That means that we of course have taxes and policy instruments, we have building regulations, we have systems for customer preferences, but in the same time we have a very tough competition between, in first, district heating and heat pumps. Okay, what's on the path towards the sustainable heating system? If you see on the production side, and the district heating system, it's biomass, recovered heat and waste incineration, and often in coupled production, so you produce both heat and electricity in the same time. But everything is not district heating. The last 10 or 12 years, we have installed 1 million heat pumps in Sweden, mainly in the single-family houses, and that's an enormous change in the single-family house sector. So high efficiency heat pumps, 1 million during 12 years. And of course we have biopallets and some other technologies, but also. On the efficiency side and the energy demand side, historically we have reduced the useful energy demand between 0.5% up to 1% a year. And when we built new houses in Sweden, they are mostly very energy efficient. So this is the situation today. So what will happen in the future in the perspective of district heating? I think the future will mean stagnating or decreasing deliveries. The question here is, at what pace? At what speed will this stagnation and decreasing take place? Of course, there will be differences between systems. Some are expanding, some are absolutely decreasing. But I think the question is at what pace? One thing that I am sure of is that we will have increasing competition in all segments. I will show you some examples, but I am strongly convinced that we will have increasing competition. We will also have increasing demand from the customers for environmentally friendly solutions, resource effectiveness, and total energy solutions. The market and the customers are, however, divided in many groups, so you will have different influences from different parts of the market. And of course, the future will not, also be influenced strongly of the regulations and the policy instruments, but since it's most connected to Sweden, I won't mention them more. And the last point, however, is perhaps the most important point, is what is the confidence from the customers? And I think that is important both for district heating and for the heat pumps deliveries and for the pellets deliveries. What is the confidence from the customers? Some details, so it won't be so abstract everything. If we have a look on the historical development of the increasing heating efficiency for the period of 1995 until more or less the year 2010, you can see in Sweden the specific useful energy demand, which is was between 160 kilowatt hours per square meters for commercial and public buildings, and 130 for single-family houses in 1995, have decreased with somewhere between 0.5% and 1%. I think, and we think, that this development will continue. However, the speed is very unsure. Within our project, we have made a number of scenarios. And the two dotted lines shows a low scenario and a high scenario, which means until the year 2050, perhaps we have reduced the present situation down to 120 kilowatt hours per square meter, or perhaps half of it. So the future will be between those two lines. I'm more or less sure. The competition. Here you have a diagram that first of all you see two green staples. It is the first of all the district heating prices of the year 2014, and you see the 10th percentile and the 19th percentile. That means that in this case it's for multifamily houses. The prices for district heating, including VAT, is somewhere between 75 and 90 öre per kilowattimme. That's on the district heating side. Those three staples, stacked staples, show what is the costs for heat pumps. It's much more complex because it depends on what the customers decides to think about the assumptions. If the customer thinks that this will be cheap, you will have a low investment. This heat pump, of course, will have a very high heat factor. I will use a low discount factor. And, of course, we will always have low electricity prices. You see that the total costs for heat pumps in that scenario will be around 50 euro per kilowatt hour, which is much less than all the district heating prices in Sweden. On the other hand, if you have a high investments, low heat factor, high discount factor, and high electricity prices, it will be much more expensive than all district heating systems. So with the present level of policy instrument, the customer could always, through the assumptions, motivate a heat pump. When did I start?
You should be coming to your conclusion.
Okay, I skipped that one. What will be the answer, the appropriate answer from the district heating company then? I think the most important in Sweden at least, and I'm sure about that, that will include Europe too. You had to put the customer into focus. The customer are not load points, they are customers. Otherwise, this competition could be too tough for the district heating companies. And of course, you had to be the number one alternative for the environment. And since the competition is increasing, you had to increase the internal economical efficiency of your company. And perhaps that's the number three most important. And then you had to, unfortunately, also try to involve and lobby towards local, national and international regulations, so they take into consideration the consequences of the system. And with 30 years of experience, now it's said, I must say it's also necessary to always explain the possibility and the advantages with district heating in the sustainable city. Otherwise, the politicians and the decisions maker often tends to forget that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, escape, I guess. Yeah. So thank you very much, Jon, for having set the scene very clearly and not in a party meeting way. I'm sure Thomas was very satisfied with one or two things he saw, and we're very satisfied as well, because when you want to address a challenge, you have to know exactly what is the situation. So thanks a lot. And now let's move to Jean.
Yeah, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. So, I think now the question of this presentation is to focus on the Lithuanian case, not because it's a general case, not because it's close or different from Lithuania, from Sweden, but because we have some experience we would like to share. In fact, the question has been how to modernize a district heating system and at the same time to meet requirement of customers. And you will see it's not so simple question. So what is district heating networks in Lithuania? First, you have to remember almost everybody in cities is connected to district heating systems. 90% of the buildings in Vilnius, for example. It has been inherited from Soviet time, and the shape, status of such systems were quite poor after collapse of Soviet Union and even till the beginning of the 2000s. And in the last 15 years, a big program has been launched by operators to renovate, modernize, and to produce it in an efficient way, more customer-friendly. So how it has been done, I will be very short on it. So increasing efficiency, optimizing the link between production and distribution, that is extremely important in such industry, but you know that. We have tried, and I suppose we succeeded to invert the production scheme to transform it in a demand-side scheme. I will come back on it after. And of course, same as in Sweden, we change fuels from fossil fuels to mainly biomass fuels. So, few indicators to show that in the last 15 years, it was not so bad. That means heat losses, for example, I took Vilnius because I have all the figures and I think it's a representative city. Heat losses dropped from 23 to 15%. Globally, the efficiency, production, distribution increased almost by 20%. That means we saved about 20% in primary energy. The rate of refill, that means the number of volume of water of network we put each year dropped from 7.5 to 1.7. At the same time, the country, it's okay? The country switched from fossil fuel to biomass at 33%. Stop of testing has been decreased, and so on and so on. And maybe most important point, the former Soviet system with group substations delivering heat in 4-pipe system to all buildings have been dismantled and replaced by individual heat substations at building level with possibility to regulate. That means in 2002, less than 1% of the buildings were able to decide temperature and regime inside the building. Now it's 97%. But where is the question? The question is, it has not created a real satisfaction for customers, despite the real improvement in KPIs. Customers have not felt the interest and the progress. Why? Because first, in 2006, the gas price jumped by 3 times to reach 500, it's too far for me, almost 600 euros per ton oil equivalent, when it was 145 in 2005, and now we are above 400. That means the tariff has been increased by more than 2 times, and that erased all technical savings and benefits from the partial fuel switch and the savings made by technical issues. Second point, in the opposite of other countries, almost no any energy efficiency measures have been implemented in buildings. That means today you have the graphic there. You can see that more than 2/3, 78% of buildings for multi-family houses have a consumption of more than 20 to 35 kilowatt-hour per square meters and per month for heating season, when a renovated one consume only 8 to 9. But the problem is almost all the buildings are in such poor status. When you consider what are the expectations from consumers, in fact, maybe everywhere, but specifically in Lithuania, the main expectation is a cost. We try to implement an individualization scheme at flat level. That means to deliver heat and controlling it flat by flat through heat allocator, as it exists everywhere in Europe. For that, the scheme has been subsidized at 75%, so it was almost no cost. The internal systems have been transformed, and heat allocators have been installed, and remote reading and individualized billing has been implemented. And that worked. Consumptions dropped by 20-25% only by internal regulation at the flat level. But commercially, it has failed. That means on the 4% of the city which has been installed with this system, in fact, mainly the new buildings have adopted such system, but the old ones somewhere refused, despite the benefit in the reduction of the heating and the control given to the consumers. Why? I want to stress a small qualitative study we have made about that. It was old, but the results are still the same now. Why some people want and some other ones do not want to have individualization of systems and possibility to control. So the pros and the cons are quite clear. Independence, transparency, savings, responsibility of end users, and possibility to measure your own consumption. On the other hand, it was new, additional investment, and I will come back on that because it's linked to the buildings. Huge difficulty to convince homeowner associations to take a common decision, sort of fear in front of responsibility. And the fact is not meter, that means you cannot control your meter, you have only to control the heat allocator. In fact, the real reason is lack of coherence between this action and the general status of the building. You have this study has been based on 4 focus groups, 10% of each, split in 4 groups, users of individualization and not user of individualization, with a spontaneous positive attitude or reciprocally a negative attitude in front of the system. And I want only you to focus on the red paragraph. The real effect of savings is not achieved as long the building is not refurbished. That means if you save 20%, but your building spend or waste 2-3 times more heat than your neighbor, you are not satisfied with the 25%. And in fact, that explains why you cannot or you should not install such system as long you have not a general status of the buildings acceptable in front of the general consumption. So, to conclude, it's quite easy. It's some cost and some effort, but it's quite easy to refurbish and to modernize old systems. Today, what we have in Lithuania is not so far from standard situation in the European Union. But to meet customer expectations, we have to promote an action which should be coherent. That means to not forget to keep a process driven by demand side and controlled by end users, even if in terms of education, in terms of training, is not so easy. People should appropriate their own energy efficiency measures. District heating system is a system. That means it should be driven not as an electricity producer, but as an heating producer, eventually producing electricity. That means to consider the heat demand is a key of the CHP mode. To consider the global system as one allows to have synergy between production, distribution, and internal system in the buildings. That does not mean we must not have any competition, but that means the competition should be organized in order to create real value for consumers, not only to create only value for competitors, and to have a balanced action between internal systems, building envelope, and management of district heating system and CHP. Under these reserves, I am convinced that district energy stays one of the optimal way to meet expectation of the different stakeholders. Consumers, of course, but also cities for the urban planning, environmental challenges, efficient electricity and heat production, safety, security, and so on. And that should be optimized at minimum global cost. It appears complex, but it's one of the single infrastructure which allows to face the changes we have now in energy systems and to be flexible for the future. If you have only one system in one building, you cannot change the systems. When you have a global system, you can change the fuels, as it has been done, and you can improve the situation of the systems. So, basically, conclusion is quite mitigated. Apparently, people in Lithuania are not so satisfied with district heating systems, but in fact, it's the only way we have to improve, and it should be efficient and modern way. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jean, for this real-life experience. I think it was very interesting in showing two things. At least the first one is that if you only look at your KPI, well, you can just overlook the fact that the customer is not satisfied. So customer focus is a good thing. We cannot only think as engineers. And the second one, which is even more important, is that, you know, Eva Hoos and Marion this morning were sometimes asking themselves whether we were really on the same path. I mean, energy efficiency on the one hand and district energy as energy suppliers on another hand. And it's very good to see that from real life experience from Lithuanian, actually what you are telling us is that you need more energy efficiency in buildings for your system to be able to provide the most of its capabilities. And now I turn to you, Dr. Craven. If you want to click on your name, your presentation will show. And don't forget to prepare for questions. I was requested to ask each of the speakers to keep on time, which I didn't do, because I was also prompt, you know, if they didn't, to gently intervene, and I am not able to gently intervene. I can only do it harshly, but as you can see, it goes on smoothly, and everyone keeps it. So.
Yeah, thank you very much. I just want to add some thing in my on my own person. I started my career in energy in Denmark, writing a study about the heat planning system. And in Mannheim, I discovered that we have the same market share on the heat market with our district heating systems, like the Danes have about 50%. And this is compared to other German cities, a very high level. So we know really a lot of district heating and customers in district heating systems. But the customers in Germany are very special. I will tell you something about this. I would like to make some difference between customers' need and customers' want. I will make some proposals how to tackle energy poverty, and of course, not surprising, I will take some conclusions at the end. District heating has a long history in Germany. I don't know exactly if it's 118 years or 121 years. The town hall in Hamburg was connected to a district heating system, but that's not so important. Perhaps we also have the ability to connect new modern buildings like this one in Frankfurt last year or this year. So district heating is still a very modern form of heat supply in Germany. This is very interesting. It shows, I think, it shows what kind of customers we have in Germany. And it's, you can't see it perhaps. The last number, it's, I think, 30,000 people, customers, which are directly connected with the utilities where we have a touch point. All other households get perhaps some district heating, but not directly from us, but from the housing corporations, from the house owner, and so on and so on. And this has a lot of consequences. We are a nation of tenants. That has some historical reasons. Our very decentralized structure with a lot of cities, bigger cities. So the density in the cities are very high, and there are not so many individual housing in these cities. And this means that our customers are not the single customer, but business companies, industry, housing corporations, and so on. And that's of course the question: how should they be protected in the future? And this is perhaps not a problem of customer protection, but perhaps some other protection systems are necessary. District heating, I don't know, it's really a different difficulty that we have only commodities. It's the same problem with the fresh water, electricity, natural gas. We can't compare it with customer goods like smartphones and so on and so on. But therefore, we made a lot of market research, and it's not only the commodity people want, customers want, it's only a good service, and sometimes, it's mentioned before, they want a better quality, more green district heating, and this is, of course, a problem for us, in Mannheim especially, but we try to make the customers feel that we want to make this district heating a little bit greener in the future. So, and we have made, of course, a lot of market research on billing. Can the people understand the bill? And I think it was very interesting. We have a common bill for electricity, water, and district heating or gas. And there was some kind of voting. And the people preferred this bill, which was very easy, not so sophisticated, and not with an overkill for information. And so we decided to take this design of a bill, I think, from the next summer on. And therefore, we are a little bit skeptic if we need some more regulation about customer protection, because, as I said, we hadn't this many touch points to the customers. And our customers are satisfied, especially the district heating customers. They are not a really big problem. Sometimes the service, okay, but it's more a problem between us and the host owner companies. Sometimes, if they don't understand the bill, that happens, or between the tenants and the house owners, but not in the relation between us and the customers directly. Energy poverty is a problem. It's some kind of families suffer from this energy poverty. Perhaps not this family. I have looked at the family. I think it's one father, two mothers, two childs, and a poodle, a doodle, I don't know. But there are certain other family types which suffers more from energy poverty, and the problem is they are living in bad insulated houses, have inefficient appliances. So other problems has to be solved, and normally 2/3 of the people who are who have a problem with energy poverty has other poverty problems too. So it's not special energy problem. And of course, there is a lack of information about energy poverty. There is a group in Germany which has tasked to monitor the Energiewende, and they have made some investigation. They have found out that there is really a problem for some special types of families, and it's clear that these problems cannot be solved by utilities. It's a problem which has to be solved by the state, by social help, and we have these systems, especially in the heat sector, not in electricity. So I think for district heating, also natural gas and so on, the problem is not so big at the moment for the people, because their bill will be paid by the municipalities. Yes, another point is transparency. As I said before, therefore, because we have not this touch point to so many customers, it's not so interesting for them to find the prices for the district heating in the internet. Nevertheless, we do it, and other utilities also. So there is no lack, as we find, of information for the customers at the moment. This is more than the regulation wants that we do. Yes, and very short, very short presentation. So my conclusions. As the structure of customers are very different in the different EU member states. I told you how it is in Germany. Transparency is a very good thing, of course, but we, as I said, it's not in the customer's interest to get some kind of overkill for informations. They want really important informations, and the real problem is that if you are not in touch with the customer, so transparency is not the problem. It's in between. The problem is more in between other market players. Energy poverty, I said, is not so much our problem. It's more a problem of the social aid programs, and I think there are some other problems we have to solve. It's a service. I think this is more a problem which can be solved by the market forces, And especially also the problem that distribution should be more green. I think this is not a problem which can be regulated. It's also in our interest to make it a little bit greener after a while. So I see not that big problems that the customer protection has to be sharpened. It's more perhaps a problem between the tenants and the house owners, but this is another issue. It's tenant protection, not so much customer protection in relationship to the utilities. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you to you. It was a short but very effective presentation. Once again, real-life experience, and I'm sure there will be many questions to you. Obviously, we moved closer to the customer with your presentation.
Very good. Thank you also on my behalf for the opportunity to be here. My name is Esa Hyvärinen. I normally don't complain of pronouncing my name. Sometimes I have to correct the person who is introducing me, because with the first name ending with A, I'm often called Mrs. Esa Hyvärinen, and that I normally correct. I am from Fortum, which is an energy company. We generate, we distribute, we sell electricity and heat. We will not, for a long time, we will not distribute electricity. We have divested that business, but in the heat side, we are having the full chain. We operate in the Nordic countries, Finland, Sweden, Norway, the Baltic states, here also in Estonia, Poland, Russia, and also India. India, we don't sell heat, they have it plenty. Up. And this is the map where we're having our heating facilities. It's about 70 terawatt hours of heat. If we also calculate the jointly owned companies, it's mostly CHP. We have, of course, heat-only boilers as backup and peak capacity. But CHP is really one of the three strategic pillars we have in the company, and we concentrate on that. With this kind of a map, who the heck is a customer? I know that in the earlier times we used to call the customer Mr. and Mrs. Heatload. When we expanded outside Finland and Sweden, we learned to know Mr. and Mrs. Regulation, who was kind of substituting the customer. The next phase was that we recognized that yes, there is somebody behind the heat load and regulation, and we started to actively and sometimes even aggressively waiting for the customer to call us. Sometimes they did. This long way since then we have come, and it's not only district heating, it's not only heat. Energy business has not been very customer-oriented business. The same applies for the electricity side. But now we're focusing a lot on customers. We have found real people behind these Mr. and Mrs. Heat Load and Regulation. They are using heating in the heat to heat the apartments and also hot water. What are the reasons why we have concentrated on customers? The key word is competition. Competition is putting us to make funny things. It's not only the customer. We have also, of course, tried to improve the competitiveness of our production facilities. As you can see here, we are concentrating on the low-price fuels, biomass, waste. It's also, we have tried to look at possibilities to produce bio-oil using the heat from the CHP plant. And the benefit is there that we are getting much more stable operating hours because in the summertime when there is not that much heat demand, we are producing oil, and in the wintertime when there is not a lot of heat demand, we are not producing oil. We are using heat pumps to extract heat from the wastewater treatment plants. We are investigating something that is called geothermal heat pump. We are drilling a hole the depth of 6.5 kilometers and putting water there, and the heat of the ground is heating that water up, and that can be directly used to heat up the district heating water. We have developed something that we call open district heating network, and then the bottom right hand corner there is our flagship project in Finland on the open heat district heating network, which is the hospital of the city of Espoo. So competition has been the key word, putting efficiency of our operations, but also focus on customers. What kind of operational framework we have experienced on fully regulated and some relatively market-based heat regimes would put permanently Mr. and Mrs. heat load and regulation to the history? We believe that it should be a competitive heat market. Customers should be free to choose their heating method. They will have to have an impossibility to have an impact on their heating consumption and thereby costs. And this is not that easy. There are different legislation facing some of the heating methods. There are different markets behind certain heating methods. Electricity market is national or regional, becoming European. District heating and some other heating methods are local. The regulatory framework, legislative framework is different. We also believe that competition promotes the emergence of new technologies and their utilization, and drives the best resource and system efficiency in heating. A couple of examples of that. We are piloting demand response in district heating based on hourly pricing. So the heat demand is different on different times of the day, and if you look at the economics books, then also the prices should vary. Let us see whether we can find good technical ways that are benefiting both the suppliers and the customers. As I said, we have something called open district heating operational in Stockholm, and it's coming also in Finland. What it means? It means that our customers become also producers. So when they have excess heat, we pack them and take it to the district heating network and pay for it. Exactly the same what happens in electricity. Some of the electricity consumers have become prosumers. We pay the market price that is defined in the function of the outside temperature. I think it makes sense if it is a -20 outside and you have heat to sell, the price is higher than when it's +20 outside and everybody is having too much heat, basically. This obviously requires a single system operator who is procuring heating from the cheapest sources, distributing and selling it to customers. It also illustrates that when we talk about energy efficiency, and especially in context of heating, one building is not necessarily the right system boundary. We have to have a look on the broader view and try to find ways to optimize the whole system. So to summarize, the key words: customer and competition. Someone of the earlier speakers mentioned also the confidence. I think these are the third C could be there after customer and competition. And we also believe that the heating sector deserves to be developed as a commercial business in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed. Well, you can see that PowerPoint presentations can finish up sharp on time without requesting the speakers anything else than start their presentation. So thank you very much for that as well. Yeah, so the rule of the game is I should not be too close from the mics, but I have to be very close to the screen, because if not, I won't be on screen. Okay, so now we are going to move to, excuse me, to our Q&A session. And I guess that the rule of the game is because you were very creative, you posted hundreds of questions, so I'm going to read them in 2 seconds and synthesize them to the panel. So in the meantime, in order to leave me a chance to read at least the first 2 or 3, I will ask a few questions to the panel. And the first one, if I may, would be to Holger. Holger, you had this previous experience with consumers' organizations, and I would like to know whether you felt any difference, and which difference, when you moved to MVV. Another difficult question for you as well is, why was this new position created, and are you aware of any such move in other German energy companies? So that's for you, and you alone, I guess. And for the others, I have very simple questions as well. The question is, almost for each of you, is do you do any benchmark of your consumer organization, benchmark towards other district heating companies, and also benchmark towards other energy companies? Because of course, once we want to be in the mainstream energy field, we have more or less to be able to compare ourselves with the other guys in the same fields. And I would especially like to address access to information, which is an important topic on the agenda. Many of our competitors, many of the energy companies want to show that they are great in access to information for their customers, and so they try to be fully up to date with the digital revolution. So I'd like to know, is it the same in your countries, and how do you think that district heating can position itself? And in the meantime, I'll try to read the questions and prepare the next ones. Thank you. Yeah.
Sure, start. Yes, I think there's one simple difference. In the consumer organization, we talked about consumers. Now these consumers are called customers. So, no, I think it's very similar. We made a lot of market research in my old organization, and we do it in MVV, MVV too, and the results are very similar. I think customers, they want to have it, yes, it's some kind of easy living. They want to have these commodities. Yeah, we have to keep it really simple. It's the customers are not so interested in many contacts. So if there are some problems, they would like to have a good service. This is perhaps not perfect at the moment, but so we try to improve it. I'm very interested if it's possible to have more communication with the consumer, for example, with other prices to several daytimes or night times. I'm a little bit skeptic if this will function, because the consumers want that the supply side is functioning, not more at the moment. And you asked me why we create this new department. It's called Customer Experience and Innovation, because we try to find new models for the customers, and this is more if they want to produce electricity or heat themselves. And normally our business was ending before the house, and we are the meter perhaps, but these new markets are developing besides the meter. So we have to find new corporations, new products to give the consumer the customer what or she wants. This is PV panels, batteries, heat exchanger, I don't know what, and but this is more in the field of electricity. In district heating, we are looking for some innovations like low X district heating. Of course, it's power to heat, and we have to find ways to integrate power to heat in our supply system. But this is, I think, more a question of the market design in the future.
Okay, thank you. Jean, maybe?
Yes. In fact, regarding consumer organizations and customers' attitude, you have to remember that in Lithuania people are quite individualist, and it's not everywhere we have homeowner association, and consumer organizations are not representing everybody. And finally, technology helped us to jump to one step by delivering information directly to the end users. It means not only through interpretation of the invoices, but also through access to the scoring of the building in the city. That means almost all the buildings in the city of Vilnius have been scored. That means to calculate on the average 3 years, for example, what their specific consumption and compare to their neighbors. And now consumers go to see their building to compare to other ones, and with that they can anticipate possibility to go to refurbishment or at minimum to understand why in 1 month invoice is too big or to compare to their neighbors. So finally, the technology allows us more to go, as I say, directly to the end users, more than through the consumer association, even if, of course, they have an important role to play.
Okay.
Thank you. When it comes to benchmarking to alternative heating method, that happens every day. So we are leaving customers, they are going for heat pumps from district heating, and we are getting new customers. So that happens every day. We don't have to do that very actively. Of course, we are then benchmarking against other district heating companies because they are not jumping that far. When it comes to customers, we have learned that yes, indeed, in the electricity side, the customers are more interested in all kind of services. They are not only buying kilowatt hours, but that is coming also in the district heating side. They are not only buying heat. The old truth was that electricity is coming from the plug and the heat is coming from the radiator, and that is much more complicated nowadays. And we want to offer them a package, a service. So we are offering customers, depending on the market, all kind of advisory services, internet and mobile-based tools to monitor their heat consumption compared to other similar houses, benchmarking, helping them to benchmark, etc. So that is coming. And now what I mentioned, this open district heating network, it is coming also, so that some of the actors, firstly maybe the business customers, data centers is an obvious example. They want to sell their excess heat, but then there are small bakeries, laundry companies. Now we have hospital coming, bus terminals, and flat buildings. Why not them as well? Where if they have an alternative heating method, then they can sometimes buy, sometimes sell. So it is coming, and we firmly believe that this is the way forward.
Thanks. John?
Yes. First, some thoughts about benchmarking. In Sweden, the District Heating Association every year publish the prices for more or less all the district heating systems, together with the CO2 emissions and the primary energy. Lately, we have tried to do the same for the heat pumps. We have tried to evaluate heat pumps installations. However, it's rather tricky to find anyone that want to show how good or bad is our installation. What is a normal heat factor, for example, and what is the normal investment cost, and so on. We try to involve the branch organization for heat pumps in Sweden, but nevertheless it seems a little bit tricky to evaluate the heat pumps. And my last reflection is perhaps a little bit philosophical. Now when we have started the second step of the Heat Market Sweden projects, we have started to discuss who is the customer. Is it the house owner or the one living in the apartment, or who is it today and who will it be tomorrow? If we will measure the heat in every apartment, who will then be responsible for the retrofitting measures? Will it be anyone? I think that's a very interesting philosophical question.
Thank you. Well, gentlemen, it looks like district heating and cooling is in the 21st century, actually. I'm not sure that everyone is aware of it, and I'm almost certain that had we had to ask the question to some of the speakers this morning, they would have questioned it. And so I think it's very good if from now on we can start with recalling things which are obvious to us, that we do care about customers, we do inform them, we are on the internet, the customer can find information, we do have innovative commercial offerings, and we work on more through research and so on. But now the floor is yours. You know, I was starting to think the system didn't work because I knew that Tim had not left the room. So fortunately now we have two questions from him, but I would like some more. And I think we're going to forget about Twitter for a while and things like that. So I would kindly ask you to raise your hands, introduce yourself, and ask questions. So who? Yes, there's a gentleman named Thomas Novak here. There's Tim Rothery somewhere, whom I would kindly ask to repeat his questions, the ones he's written to the whole of the audience. Any other? Yes. So Mr. Tim Rothery here. Any other? So please, Thomas, and then Tim.
Yes, Thomas Novak here. I've seen me this morning, European Heat Pump Association. I have a question that probably applies to Johnsson and Esa Hyvärinen. Hyvärinen, sorry, yes. And it's twofold. The one question is, you showed these bars of costs, and even though I tried to make a different impression this morning, you put heat pumps as the competition. So I would like to understand is, for one, can you give a split up of the different cost segments of district heating, investment, operation, and I forgot the other one, the third. And the second, are you proposing that district heating should be promoted even though it's not the most cost-efficient option? And the second one to ESA is, I found it very interesting that you explained that the energy grids are moving into electricity grids, and that the prosumer that we know from photovoltaics and wind can also move now into district heating. Are you actually offering that already, or maybe I didn't understand that?
Okay, thank you very much for your questions, Thomas. I'm sure you will invite some of us to your Congress, and so we can ask very clever questions as well. Don't worry. Tim.
Hi, Tim Rothery from the Association for Decentralised Energy. Although after this morning, Britain's in the Ice Age, so maybe I'm like the association for maybe sort of Iron Age energy. My question was this kind of question about transparency on consumer bills, because we talk about transparency. Well, what does a transparent consumer bill look like? We're in the process of trying to use industry regulation to say what a consumer bill should look like and what transparency might be. but I think we're not very good at necessarily understanding what it is that the consumer can understand. So part of that question is, do we compare things like total heat bill, or do you look at price per kilowatt hour?
Thank you. Who wants to start? Yeah, yes, please.
Start with the different costs for district heating. The microphone, please. Of course. Now, perhaps. The cost for district heating, the prices I show you, it was the total price published by the District Heating Association in Sweden. It includes fixed cost, power cost, energy cost, temperature cost, and everyone is totally calculated into a variable price. So the information is available, but you have to ask the District Heating System and Association. Your second question is about, what shall we say, the balance between district heating and the alternatives. It's a little bit of a questions of life, universe, and everything.
You do like philosophical questions, don't
today
you?
I feel strongly philosophical. The problem is, or the difficult thing I think is that every country looks different, which means that the solutions has to start from where we are standing today. Personally, I prefer to see that both technologies has advantages, and we must try to use the advantages for all technologies. However, this balance is has to be a function of where we start. And important for the national and international regulation is to try to find a system that gives this balance, the correct signal to every local system, that we have a competition between district heating and heat pumps and pellet plants and so on. And that's a really tricky one. So that is very close to philosophical question. But in one way or another, we trust them. Okay? Pardon? EU and Sweden, Swedish government. Let's at least we hope.
That's very brave to trust EU and Swedish government. Yes, when it comes to heat pumps, of course, our relationship with heat pumps is multifunctional, should I call like that. Clear, yeah, they are competitors as well. Like I said, we are losing customers who go to heat pump solutions, and but we are also using heat pumps. We are having big heat pump installations in Stockholm and in Espoo, in Finland, etc. So that is also a tool for us to promote, to produce district heating. And they can also in the future complement each other. Like I said, if we have this case in Finland, one of the hospitals, they wanted to have the heating solution of their own. And then before they made the decision, somebody remembered to check that, yes, it can be -30 for 3 weeks in a row. So what kind of a heat pump should they have to go through that kind of a period?
So invite him.
And then they concluded that, okay, they are going to have the heat pump, but it's probably a little bit smaller. And when it's very cold, they are buying district heating. So it's also that kind of aspect can be used. This open network, that is an open offer in Stockholm, and it's coming also here in Espoo. And we have these customers. Like I say, the data centers are the first ones to enter. Normally, they have it's a win-win case. What is a transparent customer bill? I think that there is not a universal or even philosophical answer to that. It varies very much. What is, I think, it's important, of course, that what is the unit price, but then it does not tell how many units do you need, because many experience has shown that when the, for example, regulation presses the unit price is very low, that feeds in inefficiency, and then you need a lot of units. So the more interesting topic, of course, is total heating cost. Our experience is that customers are keen on benchmarking data. So what is their energy consumption compared to similar houses or flats or etc. And this is something also that should be made available for customers.
Thank you. Holger?
Yes, also we have some, I think, bad examples in Germany. For example, for the electricity bill, we have to show the customers, I don't know, 6, 7 or 8 components, the grid, the renewables, the offshore costs, offshore wind energy costs, CHP costs, and so on and so on. And I think this is only for a minority interesting, perhaps 1 or 2% of the customers, but not for the rest, for the majority. And therefore, keep it simple. I think also total heat costs are important, but we have perhaps we get a problem. Our price structure is not the same as a cost structure. We have a lot more capital costs, but the biggest share of the bill is kilowatt hours. And I think we have to show, to learn the customers that it has to be the other way around in the future. That is perhaps more important.
Thank you. Jean?
Yeah, I want to answer just about the transparency question. First, there is no answer to your question, of course. But what I would like to stress is on the couple tariff multiplied by volume. It is not only that we must have. Of course, people know what is the tariff, specifically, for example, in Lithuania, where it is a one-side tariff. There is no fixed part and variable part, so it's quite well known. And people know how much they consume at the end of the year, at the end of the month, and so on. For me, the transparency is first why people consume what. For example, we faced strong issues when energy cost increased, because it was mixed up in the media everywhere between the general cost and the fact the cause of the increase was increase in energy cost and gas cost. The problem is education of people. People must understand where they can act and how they can act. They can act on what? On their consumption? Yes, maybe, but that needs some special efforts on that. And they must know from where the cost come. And that will impose changes in the energy policy or whatever. For example, in order to switch from fossil fuels to renewable sources or whatever, or to increase flexibility of the plant and so on and so on. The problem is when we simplify too much towards customers, the result is lack of transparency. We should explain more and more, and maybe it's the role of operator to explain how the structure of the global cost is built and how consumers can react and mitigate the impact on their bill.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. I'm not sure we have time for any more questions. Well, I'm not going to draw any conclusion because simply I think that everything which was said was very interesting, and I would like us to take it back home. Just 1 or 2 remarks, if you allow me so. First of all, it's very good that we do lose customers against heat pumps, and we gain customers against heat pumps as well, and we do lose customers against other solutions, and we do gain customers against other type of solutions, because if it were not the case, well, people would leave this room by knowing that, first of all, the opening speech was very much close to a party meeting, and secondly, our business was very close to a monopoly, which it is not, of course. And this session is about DHC in a competitive heat market, so it is the case, and it's very good to know. The second remark is, I'm sure you saw that there were slightly different responses to the question on transparency between Holger and Jean, and probably the solution is very simple. It's just to use the new the digital revolution and internet to be able to address each category of customer, the ones who want to know everything and the ones who want to keep it simple at the same time, and I'm sure we will do great in this respect. Now this comes our session to an end. There will be coffee served now, and please be straight. I'm requested to ask you to be sharp on time at 4 for the next session. Well, actually, the next session is not just a next session. It is the Global District Energy Climate Awards, so something you won't miss, by all means. It's extremely important. And before we leave for that, I would like us all to thank the speakers very much for their I think they're great explanations and their personal involvement in explaining how things are in reality on this not new, but newly looked at subject, which is very important for the future of our industry. Thank you very much to you for listening, and thanks for the speakers.